Hello everybody, welcome to module 3 of our unit, that is linking psychology concepts with applications. And today we'll be talking about the unit 3, that is motor skill learning in sports context with a special reference to the physics. So as you know, I'm Dr. Deepak Misra, scientist, Department of Sports Psychology, Sports Authority of India, Netaji Subhash National Institute of Sports. Okay, so while talking about this motor skill learning, we first have to know about what is motor learning. So motor learning is a set of internal processes associated with practice or experience, leading to relatively permanent changes in the capability for skill movement behavior. Means when we are performing some motor task, what happens the information travels from our senses to the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is responsible for memory and the executive function tasks like self-regulation, problem solving, decision making. All these tasks are there in prefrontal cortex. From there, the neural networks are generated, and the learning goes to the motor cortex. From motor cortex, travel to peripheral nervous system and to execution. So it's the set of internal process. These are the internal process which happen while we learn a motor skill. So motor learning. Then what are the phases of motor learning? What are the actual? The thing we just talked about were the internal processes that go on while we try to learn a skill. Now, what are the phases through which an athlete goes while learning a skill? So first one is cognitive phase. We can call it verbal phase or early phase. Second one is associative phase or motor phase, intermediate phase. Third one is autonomous phase or final phase. And this model was developed by Fritz and Posner in 1967. So what is cognitive phase? In cognitive phase, cognitive means cognition. Cognition means what we call cognition. Cognition is, if we try to explain it in simple terms, cognition is our higher mental processes. We can simply call higher mental processes is cognition. So cognitive phase, what happens in the cognitive phase, the beginning phase of motor learning. So here the athlete focuses on gaining an understanding of how a skill is to be performed. So how the skill is going to be performed, the basic understanding of performing the skill is developed in this phase. It is characterized by verbal activity. So athletes talk themselves through the movement. They try to verbalize the movement, whatever movement they're doing. They try to verbalize the movement. They develop a motor program for the skill. So internal program that contains a set of instructions to guide a movement. So they develop a motor program, how the skill has to be executed. So a motor program for that is developed. And the problem with this stage is they are not able to focus on the external aspects of the environment. The aspects of the environment, what is, if he is trying to perform a skill, what is going on around him, how the teammates are positioned, how the field positioning is there, what situations are there. So the athlete is not able to focus on that. In this phase, they will be simply focusing on what is going on inside them. So then it is characterized by inconsistency and numerous errors, inconsistency in performance, and errors that are gross in nature. So they will be making gross errors. Sequencing of subroutines. So every skill is divided in many subroutines that has to be followed to reach the final goal. So the sequencing of the subroutines, how means after one another one has to be followed. So that sequencing will be problematic in this phase. So focus on performing skill in closed environment. So in the closed environment means there won't be any changes in the environment. The environment will be closed one. There won't be any changes in the environment, and the same skill has to be performed in the same conditions. Dominant sensory system is vision. So here athlete is completely depending upon his this vision system, and the phase is complete when athlete can reasonably execute the skill. the way it was demonstrated. So this phase gets complete when the athlete is reasonably able to demonstrate their skill, execute their skill. And the way it was demonstrated by the coach, if he can reasonably execute their skill, then this phase gets completed. What is the role of coaches? What the coach can do? The role of the coach is to facilitate the athlete's development of a basic movement pattern by clearly communicating the critical aspects of the skill. So the coach has to communicate the critical aspects of the skill. What are the critical aspects of the skill that the athlete needs to take care of? So those aspects has to be communicated. Cues should be short and precise. The cues which are provided by the coach should be very short and precise. Exact cues has to be provided. Otherwise, the athlete gets confused. Use a lot of demos, lot of demonstrations has to be used in this phase, and numerous repetitions has to be done. Block practice will be there. So what is block practice? Means there won't be any changes in the environment. There won't be any changes in the environment. It will be completely stable, and the athlete has to repeat their skill continuously. So this kind of environment has to be set for cognitive phase of skill learning. Then what may be the example? So what may be the example? While learning to play soccer, understanding the basics of playing the game. So basics of how soccer is played, the basics has to be understood. So that part comes into the cognitive phase of skill learning, like avoiding touching the ball with hands and the arms during most of the game, and so on. Lot of basics are there. So we may say they have to avoid touching the ball with the hands and arms. They have to stay in the position they are allotted. They have to follow the basics. They have to keep running along. So all this kind of basics come into the cognitive phase of learning. So this phase basically consists of learning the basics of the game. In young tennis players learn to hit the ball over the net and keep it in the court. Other basic aspects of learning to play the game. So in tennis, learning to hit the ball over the net and then keeping the ball inside the court. So and trying to follow the rules and regulations of the game. So all these come under the cognitive phase. Then the next step is associative phase. What is the associative phase of motor skill learning? So here the focus is skill refinement to eliminate extraneous movement and make fewer, less gross errors. So the skill is refined in this phase. In this phase, the skill is refined so that the extraneous movement and the gross errors, the errors which were being made by the athlete in the initial phase, in the cognitive phase, the errors were being made. So those errors are minimized, and he can perform the skill to a greater competency level. Then what the athlete does is practices and compares and associate the movements produced with the mental image. So he associates the movements, whatever movement he's trying, his movement he's performing. So it gets associated with the mental image. That's why its name is associative phase. Associative phase, because mental image and movement both are associated. We'll listen about it further. Some attention can be directed to external environment. Now, since the skill is learned to an extent, so the athlete doesn't have to focus all the time upon himself about the errors and everything. So some of the attention can be utilized to scrutinize the external environment. Visual learning is replaced by proprioceptive control. So visual learning is replaced by proprioceptive. What is proprioception? Proprioception is perception of perception of body parts and movement. Perception of body parts and movement. So here the athlete can associate his mental image of the movement with his body movement. So both get associated. That's why its name is associative phase. So proprioceptive visual learning, the visual learning part, which was dominant in the this cognitive phase, gets replaced with proprioceptive control. Proprioceptive control means the body movement and body image is body movement and body images are more used than the visual learning part. Then this is the stage at which major feedback occurs. Feedback is there in the cognitive phase also, written feedback is there, but the major part of feedback occurs in this phase, and the learner gradually becomes aware of increasingly subtle and complex cues. So the in the process of feedback, the learner comes to know about what are the subtle and complex things in this performing the skill. So it comes to know about visual search strategies to monitor external environment are developed. So in the first page we said there are the external environment search strategies are not there. It has to be kept blocked. It has to be kept stable. But in this case, this external environment also may be kept changing, and the athletes develop the skill to screen the external environment for any kind of changes. The phase lasts longer than the cognitive phase, and not all learners will transition to the final stage of learning. So this lasts longer than the cognitive phase because a lot of things are there. The feedback occurs in this stage. The visual search strategy, the visual part also comes under this. The proprioceptive control of the movement is also there. So this lasts longer than the cognitive phase, and in some cases the athlete may not progress from associative phase to the final phase. Role of the coach is design practice to optimize skill refinement. So the coach here has to design the practice to optimize the skill refinement. First phase, it was only skill learning. Now he has to refine the skill. So to refine the skill, he has to provide different kind of environments. Like some practice will be done in a closed environment where the environment is completely stable. There is not much change, and the athlete has to go for repetitions. But in some other environment also has to be set where the environment is changing, the environmental conditions, then the positioning of the teammates and everything. These all are changing, and the athlete has to perform their skill in the changing environment. So that again, to it is simply what it is basically what we say cognitive distancing. What is cognitive distancing? Means initially we focus on the concrete aspects of a skill and gradually move on to the cognitive part of a skill. So cognitive part of the skill. So from a concrete understanding of the skill to a more subtle and cognitive understanding of the skill. So this is the phenomenon of cognitive distancing which is coming into the picture, and the coach as well as the other support staff has also have to take care of that this is being implemented. That's how the athlete progresses from basic level of understanding to the higher level of understanding. Then anticipatory skills can be acquired and enhanced through specific training in visual strategies. So visual strategies training has to be done. Visual strategies training, lot of equipments are there, lot of other strategies are there, which have to be implemented so that anticipatory skills are developed by the athlete. Effective feedback should not only focus on the movement pattern, but the proprioceptive feel of performing the skill. So feedback should not only focus on the movement pattern, how the movement pattern is there, but the proprioceptive feel of performing the skill. How the athlete is able to submerge himself into the movement. So the proprioceptive feel of the movement. This is generally noticed like maybe when we talk of such games like wushu or some such games, gymnastics, such games are there where the proprioceptive feel is very important. When you get into the flow, there is marking for all the movements, simple movements, the body part movements are marked, and the rankings are decided on that level. So if the athlete is having the proprioceptive control, he can, while performing the movement, he can find out where all the body parts are and what should be the actual position. Then only he will be able to reach that elite athlete level. So that proprioceptive level has to be reached, and the feedback should be specific, and it should be focusing on knowledge of performance. They focus on knowledge of performance and focus on knowledge of results. So knowledge of results is not that important than the knowledge of performance. You should be having knowledge of performance, how the athlete, how the skill is being performed, how all the subroutines are being executed in a perfect manner, so that the final result is highly skilled performance of the skill in question. Highly skilled performance of the skill in question. Examples of associative phase. Now again coming to soccer, better passing and scoring skills in soccer. So now the athlete has progressed from not touching the ball with arms and hands and knowing the rules and everything, to better passing and scoring skill. You can know about passing. You can better pass and score only when you can if you can apply the visual searching strategy, the positioning of your teammates and everything. So now the skill has to progress from cognitive phase to associative phase. An ability to keep the ball in the court in the tennis. So in tennis also, while like initially so much movement was not there, so much the athlete doesn't have to move a lot in the cognitive phase. He was simply learning the skill. He was trying to hit the ball in the court, trying to keep it over the net and all. But now, while the actual game is being played, he has to move along, and while moving along, he has to keep the ball in the net. He has to keep the ball in the foot. So from where he is hitting, what is the projection, what is the shot strength, everything has to be taken care of. And then an ability to dribble the ball in basketball without consistently watching the ball. So without consistently, if you keep on watching the ball, you won't be able to focus on the positioning of the whole team and your opponent. So the strategy has, the skill has to be learned at a level where you can dribble the ball without looking at the ball. So that is associative phase, where the learning becomes more proprioceptive. Then comes the final phase, which is called autonomous phase. Emerges when the learner can perform the skill at maximum level of proficiency. Maximum level of proficiency is shown in autonomous phase. Here, the real thing is he can self-identify problems. Actually, the athlete comes to know what are the problems happening, and he can self-identify what problems are happening, and he can correct it either by himself or with the help of coaches. That is not very strict, but he will be able to find out what kind of problems are taking place. Motor programs are completely formed in the long-term memory, and reaction time is short. So motor programs becomes automatic. So that's why this name is there, autonomous. Means the athlete becomes autonomous in performing the skill. Now, if something like some skill, you are learning some skill, and initially what happens, you have to remind the subroutines from time to time. When it becomes automatic, you don't have to remind the skill. And what happens when it becomes automatic, you don't have to remind it again and again. One good thing is you'll be able to perform it. You will be able to perform it without thinking about anything. And the other good thing will happen, that your reaction time will be very short. It won't take time is wasted whenever an athlete tries to think about some subroutine or something else, then time is wasted. So if the skill has gone to long-term memory, you don't have to think about it again and again, and the reaction time will become short. Requires little conscious thought. So conscious thought doesn't require much conscious thought when it goes to autonomous phase. So for performers to stay in the phase, they must continuously refer back to the associative stage, where practice ensures that motor programs are reinforced. So to stay in this autonomous phase of the skill, what they have to do, whatever problem is found out, they can find out the problem, and they can go back to the associative stage. They can go back to the associative stage and rectify the problem, and then come back to the autonomous stage. So here what happens, the associative phase strengthens the autonomous phase. So whatever means problems, whatever problems are found out, it has to be rectified by going back to the associative phase, and then it will strengthen the performance of the skill in the autonomous phase. So that has to be done. Role of the coaches is help athlete maintain the level of skill and motivate athlete to continue to improve. So maintain the level of skill, help athlete to maintain the level of skill, and then motivate athlete to continue to improve. So it is not like a plateau is reached when the skill has come to a autonomous level. They have to motivate them to look further, because there has to be subtle changes everywhere. They can even create something on their own in the same skill. Skill is there, same skill is there, which are learned by many athletes all over the world. But the one who can manipulate the same skill according to the situation is the one who becomes a champion. So the athlete has to be motivated all the time to make some creative changes in the skill so that it becomes more applicable to different situations. Then the coach has to be careful when wanting to change a highly skilled athlete's well-learned technique. Small changes can be made, but major changes in technique put the athlete back into the cognitive phase. So the athlete has, and the coach has to be cautious that whatever changes are planned, it should be like maybe the change is a means is the change is a big one, but it has to be broken down into small parts. So the athlete doesn't have to go back altogether to the cognitive phase. If the change if the change that is being made is a big one, then what happens? The skill itself changes altogether, and the athlete has to go back to the cognitive phase. But if the change is broken down into very small parts, then the athlete can do the change one at a time, going back to the associative phase and come back to autonomous phase. So the change, the change is also the change in the skill is also learned, and the athlete doesn't have to go back to the cognitive phase all the time. So this is very important uh, for coaches while training elite athletes, that whatever changes, if the coach or any support staff has planned a change in a athlete skill, so the change doesn't have to be brought at once. It has to be broken down in small parts, and it has to be continued over a period of time, so that the athlete doesn't go back to the basic stage of learning, but he stays in the middle level and comes back to the elite level. Example of autonomous phase. So reached by professional sports players and other highly trained individuals whose movements seem almost seamless in their execution. So here what we have seen in the autonomous phase is that the athlete doesn't have to think about performing the skill. It goes into his long-term memory. So in long-term memory, like you can think about it simply in terms of driving a cycle, driving a bicycle. So bicycle, what happens whenever you find a bicycle, you can drive it on your own without thinking about how you are going to drive it, because the skill has gone into your long-term memory. The same way, the skill, whatever skill is being taught has to go into the long-term memory. It has to be practiced that way, that it goes to the long-term memory, and the athlete doesn't have to think about think twice before performing it. Tips to enhance learning. What will be the tips to enhance learning? In the beginner phase of cognitive phase, so break into basic components. The whole skill has to be broken down into skill components. Introduce each component separately. Stress correct technique and repetitive skill development drill. So correct technique has to be developed in the cognitive phase only. There only you have to correct it, because once it moves from cognitive phase to associative phase, it cannot be means it can be corrected, but then the player again has to go back to cognitive phase. So basically the cognitive phase is there for this kind of activities, where all the correct techniques have to be put into practice, and it has to be repeated over time, so that the athlete learns the correct techniques there. Ensure demonstrations are accurate. Then the associative phase. Associative phase. So structure practice session to encourage skill development and enjoyment. So now the practice session has to be structured. Like sometimes it will be in a closed environment, sometimes it will be in an open environment, and you can use all sorts of learning techniques there. You can use reinforcement in the way it is reinforcement in the way it is used to make the learning better and make it more stable over time, and everything that has to be there. Then stress techniques, but gradually introduce rules, strategy, and competition-like situations. More real-time, more cognitive distancing kind of thing where the athlete depend upon the doesn't depend upon his coach and doesn't depend upon the basics, but he develops a higher level of understanding of the skills and consistently positively reinforce the learner. The learner has to be positively reinforced consistently in a different manner. Like there are schedules of reinforcement where, like if you reinforce a player continuously, then also there are the chances of forgetting the skill becomes more. So there has to be a schedule of ratio schedule of reinforcement has to be followed. That the after how many successful executions the player will be rewarded, and it has to be varied over time and in different environments, so that has to be taken care of. And then in autonomous stage, provide practice in match or competition situation, improve mental approach to tasks by training in concentration and strategy development. So the same skill, now the same skill has to be means maybe we can what we can do is we can add imagery to the skill and imagine different kind of situation and create different kind of situations, virtual reality kind of situation, so that the athlete can practice the same skill in different environments. So that happens in the autonomous stage of the skill, and allow learners to monitor their own performance and give feedback, use video analysis, and whatever higher level of feedback processes are possible that are provided in this stage. The process of feedback, what should be the ideal process of feedback is first first step for the for the coach or for the support staff, for the psychologist even, the how how the feedback has to be given, what has to be done before providing the feedback is observe the complete skill. You have to observe the complete skill, analyze each phase of the skill. So each phase of the skill, like the preparation, execution, follow through, preparation, execution, and follow through has to be there. You have to analyze all the phases, because means skill performance is more a matter of process learning than the result learning. Okay, so the process, it has to be process oriented than result oriented. So the process, if you execute all the steps in the process perfectly, then it is sure that at the completion the result will be automatically in your favor. That has to be understood by the support staff and the athlete himself, that all the sub routines, all the process, all the steps in the process of performing a skill has to be perfected. Then use your knowledge of mechanics in your analysis. So whatever mechanics analysis, whatever analysis you are doing, so the analysis has to be quantified. Quantified, that is a very important word. You have to quantify it. You cannot just give a qualitative statement that it was good or it was bad and why it was good and why it was bad. You have to quantify it. You have to quantify it. You have to compare it with international standard. You have to compare it with something. You have to compare it with something. You have to provide data. So quantification is very important step there. Select the errors to be corrected. Whatever errors are found out, that has to be corrected, and decide on the appropriate method for correcting the errors. So whatever errors were found, whatever errors are found, the correct method of working on those errors has to be found out. According to, now this will depend upon the athlete. This will depend upon the athlete. Most all the athlete doesn't learn the same way, so you have to provide individualized feedback with with individualized method of providing feedback, individualized method of correcting this. So that's how the process of feedback happens in this motor skill learning pages. And this was all about our motor skill learning in a sports context. You can go back to the theories and the details of these pages, and you can, in case of any queries or question, you can always come back and ask me. So thank you very much for patiently listening. See you all in the next lecture. Thank you.